The United States Supreme Court has been hijacked by the extreme right and corrupted to its core. American oligarchs bestow millions in gifts and largesse on right-wing justices. The court's conservative supermajority hands down deeply unpopular decisions that take away long-settled rights, concentrate power for themselves and their friends, and grease the electoral rails for their party. Sometimes an insurrectionist flag waves in front of a justice's home. Now a legal system fashioned with Leonard Leo's dark money riches and led toward dishonor by John Roberts has received a damning verdict from the American people. We are thrilled to be joined by our friend David Daley, the author of these haunting words in a new piece in The Guardian and author of Antidemocratic, Inside the Far Right's 50-Year Plot to Control American Elections, an incredible new book out this year. David, thank you so much for joining us, for writing this piece. We really wanted to dig into your analysis here, into your get your takes on sort of how we are processing this moment, how the court has brought us to this moment in such substantial ways, and what these new findings from Gallup about Americans' loss in faith in our judicial system tell us about the moment we're living through. David Daley, welcome to Midas Touch Legal AF with Court Accountability. Me and Lisa are thrilled to have you here.
I am thrilled to be here with the two of you, who are absolute heroes of all of this work. And so it's a pleasure. Thank you.
So tell us about this analysis. I mean, you're responding to this Gallup poll. You've written this powerful book that really unfurls this decades-long plot to bring us to this moment. What are your thoughts on this on this moment of lack of faith in on our judiciary and on John Roberts and the far right court's role in bringing us here?
Yeah, this is a really chilling Gallup poll that suggests that only about 35% of Americans have got confidence in the faith and the fairness of the American judiciary. And what I think is so stunning about it is that this is a worldwide poll. This is an international poll about faith in the judiciary in countries around the world. And we are near the bottom. Our collapse over the last 4 years is historic. And if you look at where this puts us with regards to other countries, if you want to find a comparison to other countries that hold their judiciary in similarly low esteem and that have lost any faith in the fairness as quickly as we have, you have to look to Syria in the years before the Civil War. You have to look to Venezuela. This is not who we want to be compared with. It's not how we teach American government in civics class, but this is where we are. I would suggest it's where we are because this is where the American right has placed us, that this is where the Roberts Court has brought us quite intentionally, quite specifically. But I think what is so clear in these numbers is that the American people see it. We feel it. We recognize it. Americans across party would like to see faith in the judiciary restored. When you look at the kinds of support that there is across party lines for the big overarching structural fixes that we need, you find that support across party lines. And as much of the blame that the right deserves for this, there is just this utter failure by Democrats, by the Democratic establishment to seize the moment and advocate imaginatively and determinedly for the kinds of change that we need. What we have seen again and again is that the party is not up to this moment, not up to a moment that the American people are telling them they need to be up to. This is a political issue that is a winner And Democrats act as if this is some third rail that they cannot touch. I think that is a profound misreading of this moment. Now, the Democratic Party did not create this moment. They sort of stood by and slumbered while this moment got here. But make no mistake, if we want to find a way out of it, it has to be a political answer. And we need a political party that is going to stand up and fight for the kinds of reforms we need.
Yeah.
That's right.
Lisa, I want to make sure you get to jump in, but just to quickly respond to that around a conversation we were having on a different video and offline with some of our allies in the judicial advocacy ecosystem about this Dick Durbin report, dropped on the Saturday before the holidays, too little, too late, not adding all that much in terms of new understanding or even calls for accountability. Lisa, you observed in that conversation offline that this sure would have been nice to have earlier on in the election cycle, and somebody responded that it wouldn't have made a difference. It wouldn't have made a difference here or there, and we push back strenuously on that, right? Because people do care about corruption. It's consistently a top 2 issue in polls. And people care about what their leaders make them care about. I think it reflects a real asymmetry in the way the parties think about political thought. Where Democrats look at polls and say we need to hew our messages to what people care about and sort of follow the polls, whereas Republicans will take nonsense. They'll contrive and invent fake scandals around Hunter Biden or tech censorship or whatever, and they'll bang these drums over and over for years until people start to care. And so here's something that people really do care about: corruption, and an opportunity that Democrats have largely just fall to the wayside. When not only is it a political winner, it's an urgent necessity.
When you look on Twitter today, Dick Durbin is taking a victory lap by counting the number of markups his committee has held over the last couple of years. It's profoundly not up to the moment.
Yeah, I mean, that's like counting the angels on the head of a pin, as the saying goes. But the reality is, I guess I have 2 thoughts, maybe more than that, in response to this. But one is that I mean, it genuinely is shocking how low the opinion is of the American people toward this Roberts Court, toward the judiciary, compared to other countries. Because for a long time, and certainly in most of the 20th century, the second half of the 20th century, the Supreme Court has been described as sort of the crown jewel of our legal system, of our justice system. And along with that has been a long-standing sort of sustained confidence that the court would protect people's rights. And instead, what we've seen under John Roberts, this captured court, a court that's been constituted like no other Supreme Court in history, with this influence of outside money, with this determination to pack it with right-wing ideologues who really do want to behave as politicians in robes, not as judges, who are sent there literally to rewrite our rights, to reverse our precedents. We're seeing this plummet in public confidence. And I have to say, despite my concerns about it from an international perspective, I'm actually deeply heartened by that reality, because the American people get it. This stinks. They know it stinks. They know this court is out of control. They know it beyond party, that this is wrong. This court is off track and it needs reform. And while there have been some real leading lights in the Senate with Senator Whitehouse, Senator Blumenthal, and members of the House with Representative Raskin and Georgia Representative, and also AOC and others really standing up. And we even saw this surge in the fall coming from the White House, and also the presidential campaign on the Democratic side to embrace court reform. It was not enough to actually enact court reform. It's one thing to talk about court reform. It's another thing to actually take that action, have those votes. Make those members who are objecting to genuine, real, much needed ethics reform, have them put their money where their mouth is, have them vote and be on the record and take the accountability if they're going to stand by this corruption. And so I think there's a lot more work to be done. But A, the American people are on our side, and B, we have more members of Congress than ever before who want reform, but we are facing some serious headwinds. And when one of the reasons we're facing those headwinds, and I'll stop and turn this back over to you, is because of the work that you document. In your amazing book, Antidemocratic. This is why I'm not going to ever compete with Vanna White for Wheel of Fortune, but for many reasons. But your book is so good, and it details the 50-year plot to control the elections. And part of why we're in this moment as well is this effort to really degrade and debrade, in essence, the right to vote in America, make it harder for Americans to vote, and make it harder to have our votes count, and pack these districts in ways that really assail fair representation, and this Supreme Court has helped, which is why we have this very narrow majority in the Congress, because of this U.S. Supreme Court, because of the Roberts Court's manipulation of our laws in order to favor the political party of the president, and the party that basically appointed this majority on this Supreme Court.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think and this book stands on the work that you and so many others have done. So thank you for making it possible. I think that the Roberts Court has issued a series of deeply anti-democratic decisions, and you can trace these back now over the better part of 2 decades. You can begin this story perhaps with Citizens United in 2010, in which they essentially unshackled billionaire dark money and injected it into our politics in especially toxic and untraceable ways, except for the indefatigable Lisa, who is able to trace all of it and track it anywhere. Mere mortals like the rest of us cannot. And one of the things that Citizens United allowed Republicans to do was to run a political play called Red Map back in 2010. That was crucial in winning state legislatures around the country that were really important for redistricting in that census year of 2010. And so Republicans were then able to fund this effort to take over state legislatures in Wisconsin, Ohio, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Florida, Indiana, around the country, purple states, red states, and they have held them ever since through the power of gerrymandering and redistricting. What you then see in 2013 in the Shelby County case is that the U.S. Supreme Court and John Roberts declared that things had changed in the South, and that all of these state legislatures were now free to go about their business and without the pre-clearance protections of the Voting Rights Act any longer. They simply weren't necessary anymore, according to the Chief Justice, who grew up in one of the most segregated towns in America. And he was so wrong about this that in the hour after this decision comes down, you begin to see how wrong the fatal folly of this decision in the sorts of laws that begin to get passed and enacted in the states that had been previously under pre-clearance. And then when citizens and voters try to push back against these gerrymanders, a few years later in the Common Cause versus Rucho case, you see that the Chief Justice decides to simply close the door to these claims. He says that they're a non-justiciable political issue, even at a time in which federal courts around the country had proven, that there was a way to adjudicate these cases like any other case by looking at evidence along a wide variety of types, whether social science evidence, whether draft maps, whether the emails showing intent of map makers, what have you. that this was possible to do, but also that there was nobody else to do it if not the courts. Where else could people go for this kind of redress? And what all of these things have done is to make it more difficult for Americans to vote. They have put barriers up before specific people in specific places. And so here we are in a moment of real anti-democratic decay that has been driven in many ways by the decisions made by this court, by justices who were put in place for the very specific reason and purpose of delivering these decisions. I mean, John Roberts says he's an umpire calling the balls and strikes. I would suggest that John Roberts is not only not an umpire, I would suggest that John Roberts is the most effective conservative Republican political operative and politician of the last 2 decades. That over all of this time, he has pushed the nation and the Constitution to the right and delivered victory after victory to the Republican Party on issues that they could never win otherwise at the ballot box through the democratic process. And that is what the courts have become, is this conservative supermajority super legislature, unelected, unaccountable, thoroughly corrupted, and deeply anti-democratic.
And you know that you wrap it up so well, and I think the umpire quote is so important because it reflects the extent to which Roberts has largely gotten away with this in terms of public perception, right? You know, even in our circles, we still hear that, you know, Roberts is an institutionalist, and, you know, he wants to preserve the reputation of the court. You know, and some of the reporting that came out about the Trump versus United States case this year, it seemed clear that Roberts thought he was, sort of in the words of Neil Gorsuch, writing this opinion for the ages that would persuade the American people that this was about something other than helping Donald Trump avoid accountability, retake the presidency, and proceed with the Republican agenda without any pushback. And a lot of this is rooted in originalism, and textualism, these sort of twin philosophies that the right-wing legal movement has been advancing for decades. And you do such a wonderful job in this book getting to the roots of originalism. And I think you say originalism might be the right's niftiest trick. And I wanted to ask you to sort of expound on that a little bit, because I think it ties so much to these poll results, to this loss of public faith, because I think that was one of the real tricks of originalism. That was part of that nifty trick, right? In offering these purported restraints on judicial activism, which was what they decried as the foul of the Warren era, right? The era of the Supreme Court, where the court almost always unanimously would strike down reactionary state efforts and step in to protect the rights of the vulnerable and find protections for these communities in our Constitution. That, you know, they're offering this idea that, you know, through originalism, looking at the original public meaning of the words, or through looking at the text of the statutes or the Constitution without extraneous considerations, that the judges would be fair and neutral, that they would be umpires. But you really break down how that was never the case with originalism. Can you tell us more about the history of originalism, how it came to be, and how it was really always a vector for this right-wing political agenda?
Yes, I think that's exactly right. I think originalism allows conservatives and Republicans to dress up their political purposes, their political intent, in robes that appear to be neutral and yet are in reality deeply political and partisan, and intentionally so. You can trace originalism back, many decades. You can take it back to Robert Bork and his influential article in the Indiana Law Review in the early 1970s, around the same time that Lewis Powell was writing his infamous memo for the Chamber of Commerce about how the right needed to become more active in the judicial realm, and how big business needed to fund that process. And really, in the Reagan White House, what you see is that Edwin Meese and the think tank that he helped build there at DOJ during Ronald Reagan's years were able to jump on this idea of originalism. I think they recognized how powerful a political idea it was, that it could be presented as common sense, that it could be presented as, well, we're not applying politics, we're simply applying the words of the Constitution. And of course, the words of the Constitution can be read and interpreted in a million different ways. We can argue historical intent. You can argue the meaning of language. It doesn't simply have one set meaning. None of this does. But when you can dress up your ideology in neutral clothes, it's a very effective tool. And it's been an effective tool. It's a tool that's really easy to communicate. It was very easy for conservatives to turn this into talking points in the era of Rush Limbaugh and talk radio, and to sort of assert originalism as a common sense judicial philosophy, when really it was obscuring the actual political intent behind it. People forget, right? Robert Bork got rejected overwhelmingly for the U.S. Supreme Court, and not just by Democrats, but by Republicans who recognized that the political purposes of originalism were abridged too far on all kinds of issues. And so Republicans simply stopped talking about where the political implications of originalism would go. And they simply started talking about how it's the common sense means of actually not judging from the bench and being an umpire. Well, and then you're able to use it as a code word to sneak all of these other justices onto the bench who believe the exact same things, but are smart enough not to tell you where it's going to go. And so originalism has been a really good mask in that regard. And once again, it's something that I don't think that the left or Democrats has had a very effective answer for, or competing theory of constitutionalism.
Yeah, you know, I think it's such a series of important points you make, David. And you know, one of the things that has happened obviously recently is that mask has fallen. That the idea that they have any neutrality or devotion to the principle of originalism, or the idea of this concocted idea of originalism, is plainly false when the Chief Justice of the United States can invent the idea that a president is entitled to immunity, words that don't appear anywhere in the Constitution, and give Donald Trump immunity, and in effect, in essence, pardon him for his crimes he was indicted for. Even though the words of the Constitution say that the president has a duty. The actual text says the president's duty is to faithfully execute the laws.
They never had any field to originalism. No. Originalism was always a fig leaf to cover a Republican conservative takeover. It was never something that they took seriously. And it's not something that even the judges who pretend to be originalists have even stuck with consistently. These
Shelby County itself, right? There's no originalism in Shelby County.
No, not at all. There's no law in Shelby County. I mean, if you look at Shelby County, the Chief Justice invented his own law. You talk about fealty to the words of the law. I mean, the Congress of the United States issued a 16,000-page report detailing exactly why preclearance was still necessary when they reauthorized the Voting Rights Act in 2006. And the Chief Justice threw that out the window. Those words didn't matter. Instead, he manufactured his own doctrine of equal sovereignty among states. He radically, and I would argue intentionally, misinterpreted the equal footing doctrine. He laid this groundwork, beginning in the Northwest Austin case a couple of years earlier. He conveniently edited the statute and the precedent simply by editing out the pieces he didn't like and using an ellipsis to cut the section that says it specifically does not work the way that he said it did. Shelby County is a tour de force of just intellectual garbage, and just it is misleading. It is dishonest, and it is the farthest thing from balls and strikes that you could possibly imagine. And I would suggest that this court's decisions, in a wide variety of cases, whether we're talking about the regulatory state or whether we're talking about guns or immunity for Donald Trump, there has not been any fealty to originalism. There has been a fealty to what the far right of the Republican Party wants the outcome of the case to be, and they dressed up the reasoning to suit that end.
Yeah. That is so compelling. And your book details that also in such amazing, just potency, what Roberts has done. And I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't say I'm writing a book about Roberts, about, his deceitfulness, in terms of how he has used the court to advance the agenda that you've described, David. But it is the case, and I think, Alex, I'd love to toss this back over to you. It is the case that that Democrats and progressives have basically taken originalism seriously in a way that the people who have been the proponents have not, have used it as a political device. And there has not been a really robust reimagining of constitutional politics, or as you described it also earlier, David, like this boldness, this imaginativeness about what our Constitution means, why it matters, what our role is. And Alex, one of the reasons I was so thrilled to join Alex with as he was launching court accountability is because I think Alex has been a real visionary in taking this on, while others have not, to say we need to have a new constitutional politics and we need to have a new way of thinking and talking about what matters and what we're going to do about it. So if you don't mind, Alex, I'll pass it back to you.
Sure. Thanks, Lisa. Well, I think it's really about the people taking back control of their country, right? And, you're right. We've acceded to these false doctrines. You could even look at Justice Kagan, who famously said, we're all originalists now. She sort of walked that back. But if you look at the way we've approached, dealing with the originalist movement, it's been to fight it on its own terms, to try to sort of adopt it and work with it. And I think it's one of the reasons that Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson is such a inspiring addition to the Supreme Court, in pushing back against that, in pushing back against the idea that it should be the court, these unelected judges in robes, that get to decide all of these critical questions of our country, from law to policy, these fundamental questions of governance. And I'm harking back to the Lincoln quote that I know we've talked about here before, commenting on Dred Scott around how, if we allow the word of the Supreme Court to irrevocably fix the major questions of American policy, the big national questions of our lives, then the people will cease to be our own rulers. And in this moment where we've got a court that is very clearly part and parcel of an anti-democratic agenda and working in lockstep with the MAGA movement to advance the theocratic and pro-oligarchic aims of Project 2025, it's essential that we not give up on these, what might seem like ancient history at this point. We're talking about Shelby County, over 10 years old now. But this is critical stuff for us to unearth, to uncover, to contextualize, so that we can build a popular movement to push back against this overwrought judicial supremacy and force our elected leaders, to the point in your Guardian piece, David, to start fighting for us, to start reclaiming that power back for us so that we can be the shepherds of our own future. David, I really want to thank you for all of the incredible work you've done, for taking the time to join us here today on Midas Touch Legal AF. it's essential stuff, and we'd love to have you back. We're going to keep following your work, keep staying in touch. Everybody joining us in this holiday week, we're thankful for your time. Please don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. Check our work out at Court Accountability. Don't miss David's book, Antidemocratic. Until next time.
In collaboration with the Midas Touch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories at the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.